I think as we age, our ability to detox gets so clogged up. I mean, how many people do you know who have had their gallbladder removed? This is an organ that we are removing, and we're saying it has no consequences. And so that's just one of the examples. Kidney stones, gallbladder stones, bile flow issues, fatty liver. I mean, fatty liver is an absolute epidemic. And so many of these things are occurring as we get older. Our ability to detoxify, both phase 1 and phase 2, get backed up. We have this kind of toxic bucket that I like to say we have. And when it just starts overflowing, so many of these symptoms come to be. Our livers are so important for detoxification.
There are definitely a few of the supplement companies that I just really hold in high regard. And so when your team reached out about organizing an interview, I was genuinely really excited. And I'm sure as we go through our conversation today, I'm going to share some of the N of one experiments in my own household that have been, to me magical, especially with one of my children. And so I'd really love to really initiate the conversation talking about BodyBio's mission and continuing the work that your grandparents did. I love that it's a family business and it's something that you have continued with this love and focus on educating consumers and providing really high quality products.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a really fun journey. It's been 8 years since my husband and I got involved, actually this month, and really just extending on my grandfather's belief that there is a serious problem that we are having with the fats in our body, the lipids that protect our cells, the lipids that protect our mitochondria. And there is a true issue with the toxic world that we're living in, how it's affecting those lipids and breaking down those lipids and increasing the rates of disease, fast tracking aging, all of these things. And so we're just really proud to be able to stand by that, the product that he invented and the mission that he created, and truly believe that people can change their lives through impacting and building more resilient cells. That's really what he believed.
Yeah. So, for the benefit of listeners, let's talk about this very important phospholipid bilayer in these cells. We're getting down to some cellular science, but I promise we're going to keep it light. But why is this so important? Why is it important for us to understand the role of fats in our cells and in terms of communication and an abundance of other items that are very important? But why is your grandfather's work so important and relevant even today?
I think he was able to almost see ahead in time. I think in the 1990s, when he started the company out of a need for himself, he had chronic fatigue from heavy metal toxicity, and really went deeper. He was a true biohacker, a true explorer who was not willing to take that diagnosis at face value and said, how am I going to live a healthier, better life? How am I going to feel great every day? And he went on that mission, and he discovered through that all of this research that led him to believe that so many of these things that we're exposed to, the hundreds of thousands of chemicals that have been introduced that are, quote, safe, but then of course they're removed from the market later at a later date, actually are not safe, and they're having lasting impacts. And a huge part of where they impact our health is obviously in our cells. Our cells are the root of every single thing in the body. It sounds very esoteric to talk about cells, but it's so important because cells are where disease occurs. And our cells are protected by this healthy, this fat, this phospholipid bilayer. It's like a bubble that surrounds all of the different organelles within the cell, the nucleus and the mitochondria and the endoplasmic reticulum, these things that you're, thinking about from high school biology. But this phospholipid bilayer breaks down. And what happens as we age is our ability to synthesize these phospholipids from food decreases, particularly even worse for postmenopausal women.
Mhm.
And this bilayer is also broken down by toxin exposure. So whether it's viruses, whether it's chemicals, heavy metals, microplastics, think about, we can't feel the impact of microplastics, but we know it's happening and it's impacting our cells. And so it's breaking down this phospholipid bilayer, and then this stuff that we do not want in our cells is getting into our cells. It's getting into our mitochondria. It's affecting our energy production. It's affecting our epigenetics. It's actually changing our genetic DNA. It's altering our epigenetics and activating things now that shouldn't be activated, right? I mean, children getting all these different diseases, people getting colon cancer in their 20s. These things should not be happening. The rates of autoimmune disease for women are just astronomical. And it's this breakdown in this phospholipid layer that is a part of that process. I'm not by any means saying it's a cure for all of these things, But we have this breakdown and we need to start addressing it. And really, that's so much of it came from that. He was like a high fat fanatic, right? He was eating 12 egg yolks a day. He
Which
truly
back then
believed,
was really, I mean,
yeah,
was totally against the grain because that's when I was in my training and we
low fat.
bastardized fats. We told everyone fat was bad.
You
That was
still go into a
terrible.
hospital and everything's low fat. It's
It's
insane.
it is a little bit bizarre to be
Yeah.
completely transparent with you. And I agree. And what I find really interesting when I kind of reflect back on cell biology and the cell danger response and chronic
Mhm.
inflammation and all the things that are a counterpart, a reflection of what's going on at a deep cellular level. This is our modern day lifestyles coming out. And the thing that I find interesting is traditional allopathic medicine, and I'm not dumping, I'm just saying there are limitations to that
Mhm.
kind of traditional model. And it's why so many people continue to not feel good. Let's use it as an example. They've got an underactive thyroid. If they don't fit in this very broad range of lab values, they're missed. And,
Yeah.
we start to think about mitochondrial dysfunction, which really accelerates after the age of 40. You add
Mhm.
in perimenopause, which is just, it's like a little match gets lit that just accelerates this oxidative stress and inflammation in the body. And for many individuals, they just don't feel good. And that becomes their normal as they are getting chronologically older. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so
Exactly.
I always humbly say, know better, do better. But a lot of the rhetoric that I started with as a new nurse practitioner, I look at now and I cringe because we
Sure.
bastardized all fats, animal-based fats, encourage people to have, in many instances, a lot of these rancid seed oils. And I know that we'll unpack healthy omega-6 fats versus the oxidized, rancid, highly processed variety. Where do you think the average person, when you are talking to individuals, working within your company, where are some of the kind of hidden underlying causes of cellular senescence, dysfunctional cellular membranes? What are some of the common reasons? Like we talk about this modern day lifestyle that's exacerbating this, but for listeners' kind of benefit, what are the most common things that you think are contributing to why our cell health is so problematic?
Chemicals, introduction of so many different chemicals. Think about it when you're walking around Home Depot or Lowe's, or when you're walking around a Target looking at, these different cleaning agents. There's a reason there is such a movement towards cleaner products and more natural products. And it's because a lot of these chemicals affect us greatly. Heavy metals, wherever they are, the introduction of all of these processed foods, these also are chemicals in these foods. And so this replacement of, just take a margarine, for instance, the replacement of something healthy and natural with something that is chemically made and altered and biochemically engineered to be different. It's just none of it makes sense. And so much of this that's happened in the last, let's say 50 years, just has a true impact on our health. You also have things like viruses, vector-borne diseases like Lyme disease. These things can greatly impact our cell membranes, and many of us are walking around not even realizing we've ever been impacted by Lyme. I'm amazed all the time how many people say to me, I finally went and did a really intense Lyme panel, not just my general GP, and yep, you were right, my headaches were caused by Lyme. And we're walking around thinking that we're completely fine. I found out about 2 years ago that I had Lyme disease. I never even knew. And so it's, one of those things, mono when we're younger and we get Coxsackie, hand, foot, and mouth. All of these things impact these viruses, impact EBV. There's so many different things that are impacting our cell membrane and causing, we all are so familiar with leaky gut, but this inflammation is also causing leaky cells.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. And when I lived in Northern Virginia, we had the highest rate of Lyme in the entire state. And so even though I was nicely, conveniently tucked away in cardiology, we were faced with unusual presentations of Lyme all the time. And just as a fun fact for listeners, the family, they're spirochetes, the type of bacterium that Lyme and people don't like to hear this, syphilis, they're not the same thing, but they are similar in terms of their morphology, the way that they work. They're called the great masquerader. They hide. Sometimes it
Mhm.
can be very hard to diagnose, very hard to treat. And so, I'm of the belief system that more often than not, tick-borne illnesses are at the basis for a lot of chronic health problems. But
Yeah,
I think we're getting better at diagnosing these
we
things.
are. It's
But
becoming
in
more mainstream.
yeah, but it certainly it's interesting. I'm doing a functional medicine certification, and we had this big lecture with like one of the big Lyme disease doctors, and I sat in awe during this lecture and thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack here." And what's
Yeah.
interesting is for listeners, it was 30 years ago. One of my best friends got married. I got bit by a deer tick. I am unlike most people that I have always had this magnified response to any insect bite my entire
Mm.
life. I got classic bullseye rash. And at the time, my very astute primary care provider, I was seeing her for something else. And she was like, I don't want to talk to you about what you came in for. I'm focused on your leg. And so I was treated very appropriately with doxycycline. And I always say very humbly, how many people are bit and are completely
No
unaware that
idea.
they were bit and go on to develop mystery illnesses that turn out to be related to multiple. Oftentimes, it's more, not just Lyme; it's multiple tick-borne illnesses. And the one that I find most interesting right now, and I'm going off on a tangent but relevant, there's something called Lone Star tick
Hmm.
at University of Virginia, which is close to where I live now. There were some researchers there that probably more than 10 years ago diagnosed that some people that are bit by this particular tick will develop a mammalian meat allergy. Why is that relevant? Some of my patients that needed to have cardiac surgery could not have cardiac surgery because they had developed an allergy to pork. And pork is in heparin,
Oh,
and heparin is a drug that's given for patients in many instances having surgery.
of course.
Or I would have patients that suddenly would, they would be anaphylactic. They would have these severe allergic reactions. And,
Wow.
it's a small percentage of people, I don't know the specifics, that will develop this mammalian meat allergy. But imagine something as benign as a tick bite, then going on to create an allergy to meat. That would be devastating because I love meat.
Unbelievable. It's the
But
really, I've heard so many times. I thought it was MS. It was originally from Lyme. There's a root to every problem that we're experiencing. And so
absolutely.
oftentimes people think they're finding the root cause, but it goes even deeper than that.
Yeah,
And I think that's with a lot of the case with even within functional medicine.
yeah.
They're addressing the root cause, but if you're not actually addressing cellular health, you're missing a huge component of healing.
How does cellular health impact longevity? When you're, having these conversations and we're talking about this complex interrelationship with the health of our cells and how that impacts how we age, how we feel, how we view the world. How do longevity and cellular health go together for you?
I mean, longevity is aging well, right? And putting off disease. Eventually, we all die from disease. That is how we all pass away. Disease occurs within the cells. And so, to me, protecting and making your cells more resilient is directly tied to better health span, better lifespan, better longevity. 60% of our brain is fat. So if you just isolate brain function on its own, as we age, our ability to synthesize phospholipids from food decreases. So we talk a lot about these healthy fats that make up our cell membrane and these phospholipids. The main one is called phosphatidylcholine, which some people may have heard of. And as we age, our ability to get these from food decreases. We're getting the insult of our modern day environment that is breaking down these lipids even more. And it's causing a problem within our cells to communicate. So that neurotransmission is no longer as strong as it used to be. Our mitochondria also have phospholipids, and they have various different fats that are a huge part of their energy production. We lose energy. So all of these things, these little biochemical processes, are affecting ultimately how you feel and how you age. And it's something that's not talked about enough, but I think it's so important to be getting these healthy fats in so that our cells are optimally functioning. Our brain function is better, our memory, our retention, all of these things are working better when we're taking care of ourselves.
And I think a lot of people think about the aging process of we just need to replace hormones. And I'm not suggesting that it's
Yeah.
it's that simplistic. I think it is far more than that. Certainly with conversations I have on the podcast, whether it's micronutrients, whether it's those healthy fats, I think there are still a large group of the population that are fearful of fat consumption. And I
Hmm.
think that's very important to be having this conversation so that people understand that these phospholipids are important for cell function. They're important for signaling, which is messaging. It's like I always trying to explain to my kids, messaging between cells, messaging between hormones and neurotransmitters. All of these are so important.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about different types of fatty acids. I think this always comes into the conversation because it gets, I think that we've gotten so generalized in our, fats are bad, fats are good. People don't necessarily understand or are able to adequately kind of differentiate different types of fats. But I think fatty acids in particular are very, very important. And I absolutely want to talk a little bit about my 17-year-old as we kind of dive into this.
Yeah, and I think people hear polyunsaturated fats and they're just immediately scared away. Saturated fats are obviously solid at room temperature. Polyunsaturated fats are not. I call them bioactive lipids. They're like living, breathing, moving little molecules. And not literally like bacteria, but polyunsaturated fats have an energy to them. And polyunsaturated fats are essential fatty acids. Essential fatty acids are not something that we make in the body. So we make phospholipids that we were just talking about that protect your cells. Their other part of the cell membrane is part essential fatty acid. We have to consume them. That's why they're called essential. That is why things like seed cycling are, proponents of hormone regulation. Essential fatty acids, the two mother essential fatty acids are omega-6 and omega-3. And so often we talk about these ones down here, these omega-3s, EHA, DHA, and EPA, but we're not talking about ALA and LA. LA is the one that is always bastardized. People go crazy over oxidized omega-6, which is bad. The stuff that is used in all this packaged food and all the processed food and all the fast food and that's heated in restaurants and vegetable oils, that stuff is rancid. That stuff is bad. You need to be very, very careful with how polyunsaturated fats, essential fatty acids are treated. And that even goes for your fish oil. I would venture to say 90% of fish oil in the market is actually rancid. It's just as bad as that vegetable canola oil sitting on the shelf at your local supermarket. And so people try to act nuanced and they go all crazy, but we're really throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we say all omega-6 is bad because omega-6 is an essential fatty acid. And there's a whole host of incredible biochemical processes that are involved in the downstream metabolites and the building blocks for eicosanoids, which are responsible, they're almost like hormone-like compounds, and
Mhm.
they're responsible for inflammation, both pro and anti-inflammatory signaling in the body, ovulation and menstruation, labor and delivery, immune response. And so you need a healthy balance of these essential fatty acids. And it's hard to get that because of all the processed crap that is out there. And so we think, let's avoid omega-6 and let's take a bunch of fish oil. Doesn't work that way. These two pathways don't cross over into each other. And so really what you want to do is find a great balance in your diet. I love raw seeds. I think raw seeds are one of the best things you could possibly be eating. Also from your foods, from meats, from organ meats, from fish, from shellfish. All of these things are really great ways to increase these beautiful essential fatty acids in the whole food form.
I think you're bringing up such an important point is that in many instances, and I have to believe that people were well intentioned about bringing greater awareness to rancid, processed, polyunsaturated oils, but I think it's come at an expense.
Hmm.
And I will share very transparently with my listeners that my youngest son, probably about 2 years ago, got a strep infection like most kids do. He's a pretty healthy kid. But after his strep infection, he had a lot of neuroinflammation and it showed up in some behavioral quirky things that started to happen. And so, through the course of working with a wonderful integrative medicine doc, we did a lot of testing. And the first thing he said was, he was like, Cynthia, no wonder why he's so inflamed. He is deficient in omega-6 fatty acids. And so, part of his recovery I really think is instrumental has been this balance oil that your company creates. And in many instances, I think so many of us have gotten so conditioned that omega-6 are bad, even as clinicians. Like we've gotten so focused on anti-inflammatory as opposed to pro-inflammatory, and our body is constantly looking for balance. And
Hmm.
so let's talk a little bit about what these omega-6s are doing. I know you kind of gave us a broad overview, but in terms of brain health, immune function, communication in the body, why are those so critically important? And why are we getting overly fixated on nuance when it really we should be thinking a bit more broadly.
I think there's also a detriment within the testing. And so what people do is they go and they get omega quant. They do a test that shows they have 22 to 1 ratio of omega 6 to 3. That's firstly, it's looking at blood plasma, not your red blood cells. Blood plasma is going to show what you've consumed in the last week. It's not actually going to show how it's impacting your cells, how it's impacting the cell membrane. For that, you actually have to look at a red blood cell fatty acid analysis. And those are not easy to get. The omega quant, very easy to get. These omega tests, finger prick tests, very easy. They're not testing the right thing. And so, yes, adjust your diet, remove the rancid oils. If you're going to eat in a restaurant, asking for steamed food, try not to eat something that's doused in vegetable oil. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time. Look for the French fries that are cooked in tallow, not canola oil, things like this. Really, really important. But it's also really important to be supplying the body with the right omega-6s, the right form of linoleic acid, whether it's from seeds, whether it's from a product like balance oil. Balance oil was created to provide the 4 to 1 ratio, 4 parts omega-6 to 1 part 3. And because that is the ratio that our cells need. And so it's this really carefully treated, non-oxidized, cold pressed organic product that really helps to rebalance that essential fatty acid pathway. And so even if you are going to consume, if I go out to a restaurant and I know I'm not being careful, I just want to enjoy my meal with my family, I'll go back home and take balance oil because I know it's going to help to balance out the impact of any rancid sixes that I am actually eating. So I really love, I think so often we talk about evening primrose oil and people are totally fine with talking about evening primrose oil. That's an omega-6,
Yeah.
right? It's a downstream metabolite from linoleic acid. And I love evening primrose oil. Much of the evening primrose oil on the market is actually cut with borage oil, which you don't want. And so you want to make sure that you're getting a pure evening primrose oil. But these are people say that they're pro-inflammatory because they help with the body's inflammatory response and in mounting an inflammatory response when it's needed. But when they are all balanced, these essential fatty acids actually really help to balance these cell signaling molecules so that everything exists together. When we remove one and we are replacing with oxidized six, so when we're consuming a bunch of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then we're thinking we can take a fish oil to balance all that out, it's creating absolute chaos and havoc in our cells. And so that's one of the worst things I think we can do. And I think just eating the right foods, consuming the right nuts, the raw seeds, I think is really helpful. Taking products like balance oil to help balance all those essential fatty acids out. I consume it every single day. I love making salad dressings with it. We have a liquid version. I make this I take balance oil every morning I do like raw milk, a protein powder, balance oil, a little bit of minerals. That's my go-to start to every single day. My kids love it as well. It's great for kids. And I've had people from all forms of issues with children tell me their eczema is gone,
Mhm.
their neuroinflammation, their ADHD. It's wonderful for kids who have ADHD type symptoms. There's always a root cause, and so often it's an imbalance at the cellular level. It's this cellular inflammation that's occurring.
Yeah, I think, for me, seeing it from the perspective of a parent, even as a clinician, it was nearly miraculous because I feel
Wow.
like within probably 3 months of him taking it, and he dutifully takes it. Like I don't have to give him a hard time. He takes it. He actually uses the oil, in
Wow.
addition to some other things. Takes it every night, doesn't complain, does it because he said it makes my brain feel better. I feel
Interesting.
better. And so, we talk about crotchety, grumpy teens that don't want to do what their parents or frankly, their healthcare professional is suggesting to them. But I think even as a 17-year-old, he definitely has been able to see the benefits and
Amazing.
feel them quite significantly. Now, on the flip side, we're talking about omega-6s, how in many instances we just need greater education around the benefits and not stressing so much. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as that expression goes. Talk to us about omega-3s because they are also important. And for a lot of individuals, they don't like fish. They don't want to have chia or flax seeds. They don't want to have the walnuts. Talk to us about the benefits of omega-3s. Obviously, it's this 4 to 1 ratio, omega-6 to omega-1s. But I think, sorry, omega-3s. But I think for a lot of people, they think if I just take fish oil, I'm set. I don't have to worry about it. And certainly from, what you have suggested with a lot of the fish oil products that are out there that are rancid, oxidized, that's not of benefit. So how can we focus in on the benefits of omega-3s and ensure we're getting enough in our diet and or plus or minus supplementation?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of benefits to omega-3s. Particularly, there's been so much research on EPA, DHA. ALA is the higher level essential fatty acids. So LA and ALA are at the top of this little food chain. And the downstream metabolites are EPA and DHA. The conversion from ALA, which is found in many seeds, and that's the reason so many people talk about seed cycling. The conversion to DHA and EPA from ALA is actually very minimal. And so that's why we always suggest people get whole food forms of EPA and DHA. We actually make a fish oil product that is cold pressed caviar. So caviar is one of the only caviar and breast milk are the two areas that supply specialized pro-resolving mediators, which are a really important component to omega-3s that are responsible for resolving inflammation. And so omega-3s in general are highly anti-inflammatory. The problem is the actual sourcing and the actual production and the amount of artificial nonsense that is added to these to make these not as anti-inflammatory as they were originally intended to be, which is why we often tell people to eat whole food forms. So I think just be careful with your source when you're going for the omega-3s. I think in general, omega-3s and EFAs in general are incredibly important for endocrine gland function, helps with adrenal gland regulation, all the sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid function. So you want them in balance. I think it's really, that's hence why the product's called balance oil. That's the critical piece here that I think is so important. And I think that, years ago, we would have been able to balance all this out with our diets. But the problem is we've kind of thrown so much mess in there that it's thrown everything off. And so I think in general, I love omega-3s for brain function. DHA for brain is critically important. I always recommend women take it, particularly in their third trimester when they're pregnant. But in general, it's also very supportive of liver detoxification of estrogen, which is really important in perimenopause and postmenopause, and also just for, general hormone regulation. So I think that omega-3s have a really great place. I don't think they have this panacea that people have claimed for several years that they, cure everything. So yes, of course they are anti-inflammatory, but they're anti-inflammatory in when everything is in balance.
And I think that's really key, the emphasis on just greater awareness of, what your own biological needs are. I think for many people, and like as an example, my 17-year-old has always hated fish. And, he was the kid, even if we tried to get him to eat certain things, he was just very resistant to do it. I think for many of us, we have our own kind of proclivities, we have our own preferences.
Mhm.
And this is where I think testing can be very important. The question is, are people getting the right types of tests to assess their own personal needs?
Yes.
From your perspective, are there tests that you prefer to talk about, or we don't necessarily have to talk about brands, but we could certainly talk around this. What do you feel like is the most beneficial way to test for these essential fatty acids?
The best test is, and it's one that we're working on. It's a red blood cell fatty acid analysis. We've actually done it for many, many years. We've done our tests for over 20 years. We've just never made it available to the public. And so it was only available to some specific doctors, but they've seen incredible results for it. And we're updating it so we will be able to offer it next year, which I'm really excited about. And it's going to look at the red blood cell fatty acid analysis, and it will look at the 3-to-6 ratio. It will tell you what type of fats and renegade fats are building up in your cells and what you need to get rid of, and what the dietary changes are in particular that I think are really helpful, because it's so easy to say, like, here's a supplement that'll help, but it's really also important to address nutrition and food as medicine and really treat it as such. So I think with testing, just as your clinician that worked with your 17-year-old did, I think it's about really taking a nuanced look and making sure you're working with a professional who really understands the essential fatty acids and how they play into cellular health and cellular function.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of the challenges of working in a functional integrative space is that there are a lot of amazing tests. They're not traditional allopathic tests. They can be valuable. They can also be very expensive. They're not covered by insurance. And if you're not working with someone who knows how to interpret the test, then it ends up being a very expensive, somewhat non-beneficial way of looking at additional data. And that's why I think it's so important. Whoever you're working with, make sure whatever test they're running, they've looked at hundreds of them. It's not you're the guinea pig and this is the second time they've looked at this test and they're not 100% sure how to evaluate it. I think that is certainly very important. Now, you've mentioned several times, and I think it goes without saying, for many women kind of navigating middle age, they suddenly start hearing buzzwords like detoxification and looking at mitochondrial function and gut health. Talk to me about the role of things like TUDCA in particular, which is one of my favorite supplements that you all make. What are the unique benefits of utilizing this supplement to support mitochondrial health, to support detoxification and liver health in middle age and beyond?
Yeah, and I think as we age, our ability to detox gets so clogged up. I mean, how many people do you know who have had their gallbladder removed? This is an organ that we are removing, and we're saying it has no consequences. And so that's just one of the examples. Kidney stones, gallbladder stones, bile flow issues, fatty liver. I mean, fatty liver is an absolute epidemic. And so many of these things are occurring as we get older. Our ability to detoxify, both phase one and phase two, get backed up. We have this kind of toxic bucket that I like to say we have. And when it just starts overflowing, so many of these symptoms come to be. Our livers are so important for detoxification. And when they get backed up, it's just a product that I think is so helpful, and you've probably seen it firsthand, to get everything flowing and get the liver kind of rejuvenated is TUDCA. And no amount of milk thistle or, dandelion or what's the other one people take? Turmeric is going to have the effect that something like TUDCA does. TUDCA is a bile acid and it helps to get that bile flowing. So your gallbladder is where bile is stored. Bile is constantly passing through both the stomach and the liver, and it helps to kind of move that function along so that we are able to detoxify better. So if you take glutathione, but your liver's all backed up, you're not actually able to remove a lot of these things through the body. And we know, obviously, you've talked about this a lot on your podcast, how important that movement of estrogen and of our different hormones are. They go through the liver. And so it really optimizes liver function, liver health, and gets things moving. Really interestingly, TUDCA is also a molecule that has many different benefits. It's made in the body, but it has many different benefits to it. It's also a chemical chaperone, which is a really interesting molecule. One of our other products is as well. It's called Butyrate. That one's more for gut health. TUDCA's focus is more on liver. And it has this role in the mitochondria and in the cell of kind of breaking down the toxic sludge that's stuck in our mitochondria and moving it out of the body. And the way we move it out of the body is by using the healthy fats like balance oil and PC. And so it's part of the overall protocol of how do we break down this stuff that's affecting our DNA, affecting our epigenetics, and TUDCA is one of the key components that helps with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's part of my new book. I talk about it, and as we are losing estrogen, as we're navigating the latter stages of perimenopause and menopause, we start to lose the ability to effectively break down and emulsify fats. That becomes
Mhm.
part of it. Women, in many instances, they become fat malabsorbed, their
Yep.
digestion is off. To your point about how many women in middle age, we had a mnemonic, which I'm not going to repeat, but the mnemonic was women of a certain age come in presenting with right upper quadrant pain. It's 40, flatulent. It's this whole like mnemonic that's created for the perfect ideal storm of women that are dealing with trouble breaking down and emulsifying fats.
Yeah.
Add into it the metabolic health crisis that we're experiencing, and that certainly contributes as well. Is there emerging research that you're aware of that's discussing some of the benefits for TUDCA and the interrelationship between brain health?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot. They were actually studying, they were using TUDCA in a trial for ALS. It actually did not end up making it through the second phase of the trial. I think there were some flaws in the way that they were setting it up, but its role as a chemical chaperone in that way. TUDCA and its role in neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration is really interesting and how it's starting to resolve that. So it's very emerging. I don't talk about it a lot because you're getting into drug territory, but it's a very powerful compound is what I would say. And I think it's one of those things that will be looked at as a very powerful nootropic, and particularly for aging, and particularly for anybody who has any history, familial history of neurodegeneration.
Yeah, for me, I think the more I learn about TUDCA, the more humbled I am with the way that, we view it as in allopathic medicine, but it's actually not a new,
It's not. It was in
it's not
Chinese
new.
medicine for hundreds of
Correct.
years from
Correct. So
bear
it's been
bile.
complementary, right? It's
Yeah.
complementary medicine. And so I look at how we're kind of merging things together. And in many instances, patients that I put on TUDCA, it's life-changing for them.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
love that. I feel like TUDCA for me, I had a after I had my first son, I had complete fat malabsorption issues. I would eat an egg and be in that awful upper quadrant pain, that nausea that you kind of don't understand. And I'm in this space, right? And I'm asking all the right questions, and nobody could really tell me what it was. And years later, I look back, it was at that time that I started to particularly say, like, okay, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to take TUDCA. Well, I'm able to eat eggs. I eat tons of eggs. I'm able to eat meat. I don't have to take it as much as I once did because that bile is circulating and I'm able to break all of that down. I used to have a lot of like liver pain, I felt like too, particularly after I had the kids, because your hormones are fluctuating so much. I actually really like to recommend that women take it after they like give birth because it's helping to regulate so many of these hormones, not every day, but every couple days. I think it's really helpful. And it entirely changed the game for me in terms of fat absorption. So if you suspect a history of gallbladder issues, my mother had her gallbladder removed, my grandmother, if you suspect you have issues digesting fats, you feel that like weird pain, or it may feel like acid reflux, it's not. And introducing TUDCA, I think, can be really, really helpful. And I think it changes things pretty quickly for people.
It's interesting. I sometimes will ask patients, do you notice that your stool, I know I'm a nurse practitioner. We talk about poop, but if you look at your stool, if your stool is floating on the surface of the water, if it looks greasy, if you have a lot
Yeah.
of trouble, like you go to dinner and you have a ribeye steak and you come home and the next day you're like, I feel nauseous, I don't feel good. A lot of people just don't digest their fats properly. And I think this is exacerbated slash magnified by the past 40, 50 years of bastardizing fats. People were terrified to eat fats. Now they're starting to eat them and their bile just isn't working as effectively as it once did. That is
Yeah.
certainly a contributory issue. On the other side is butyrate. And this is a molecule that I find to be like truly like the unsung hero of the gut. Let's
Mm.
talk about what exactly it is and why it's so critical for overall health and not just with the gut.
Butyrate is a postbiotic. So we know what prebiotics are, we know what probiotics are. Butyrate is the byproduct of a healthy microbiome. When you have specific keystone strains of bacteria in our gut, which many of us are missing, and you're feeding it specific foods, resistant starches. So plantains, green bananas, oats, specific types of fiber, these specific bacteria eat, and then you produce ample amounts of butyrate. No one's doing that these days, right? Our guts are so disrupted through antibiotic overuse, through pesticides, herbicides, all of these things that are damaging our gut and our bacteria levels in the gut. And so butyrate is a product that you can take. You make it in your body, but you can also take it in therapeutic doses. And it really has unbelievable anti-inflammatory benefits. It's an incredible molecule. It's the molecule that regulates our immune function. It tells immune cells when to trigger autoimmune reactions. It's really incredible. I mean, they're looking at it for so many different things, some things that I can't mention, but it's critically important. We're doing a bunch of clinical trials with it, one in particular with the VA that I'm so excited about. That's a 5-year trial. It's extremely effective. You will feel it if you start taking butyrate in days. I mean, you will have better bowel movements, better bowel function, and less bloating, less flatulence, less gassiness. It helps with all of those things, but it goes so much deeper as a molecule in the body and helps on the cellular level as well. It's really awesome what it does.
Yeah. And how do you think it works to support the gut lining integrity? So we know we have one cell layer thick in the small intestine, and we are at greater risk. As again, I have to hate to keep harping on this, but it's the topic of the new book. Women are at greater risk for developing autoimmune conditions. This escalates in the setting of shifts in sex hormones as we're navigating perimenopause and menopause too.
Oh yeah. And it's so important. There's two products I think that are critically important for the gut lining. And remember, this gut lining is one cell thick. Food for the gut lining, these colonocytes, that's what they're called, is butyrate. And so feeding it butyrate is going to help seal that leaky gut and protect that lining. Your gastric mucosa is also made of phosphatidylcholine, which we talked about earlier, that phospholipid, that healthy fat that feeds your brain. It's everywhere in your body. It's in your liver, it's in your skin. I don't do Botox, I'm 41 years old. It's my key fat that helps with plumping up your cells. It also does the same in your gut lining. And it's a critically important supplement, both of these really for women as we're aging, because we're losing the ability to produce butyrate in the gut. We're also losing the ability to create phospholipids and phosphatidylcholine with the decrease of estrogen that we see. So, with a
Mhm.
decrease of estrogen, you're decreasing PEMT, which is responsible for pulling the phospholipids out of the food you're consuming. And so we need these products more than ever. And we just see unbelievable results when people start taking them, whether it's better gut function, better brain function, less brain fog. All of these things are really impacted. And I think that we can't go through life as we once did, in the same way that you can't smoke a pack of cigarettes like your grandparents did and expect to live till 95 like they did. Our world is just much different, and these things impact our cells. And so providing these resources for our cells to make them more resilient is really our mission at BodyBio.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just released a podcast talking with my integrative doc, and he was saying we can't compare our generation to our grandparents. We absolutely can't. We have an onslaught of, to your point, toxins, chemicals that we've been exposed to. The food is so different. Our stress is different. People are living longer. You can't compare apples to bananas. And so,
No.
always really good to kind of think about that. And so, explain to me, just to kind of tie up the butyrate conversation, how is butyrate and metabolic health so intricately
Oh, yeah.
interwoven with one another?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. But butyrate is the molecule in the gut. So it has all these different roles. One of the roles is to increase GLP-1. One of the roles is to help regulate blood sugar. And so it helps in both a way that is, a bit like two different drugs to increase these molecules that help to regulate metabolism. And so it's a really powerful, I take it after meals. I love to take it after meals because it helps to balance blood sugar. It helps to regulate insulin resistance. I once had PCOS, so it's my, go-to. I've had three healthy babies, no issues with pregnancies. And it was always my go-to to really just help even things out when you have all these spikes that are causing so many of these fertility issues and hormonal disruptions. And I think metabolic dysfunction is really one of the roots causes of so many issues. And so anything that we can do to help increase our ability to just digest things properly and utilize them in the body properly is beneficial.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, endogenous GLP-1 production is also kind of closely tied into, keystone bacteria like Akkermansia. And so helping people understand like there's a lot at play. And I think the use of the GLP-1 drugs for a lot of people is life-changing, but we're also speaking about the important things we can be doing day to day that will support our metabolic health. And I think, as you astutely stated, 92 to 93% of us are not metabolically healthy. It's really important that we're doing all the things we can do to kind of, if we're already there, if we're becoming insulin resistant or we are diabetic, to reverse that. And for those of us that are metabolically healthy, to do everything we can to ensure we never get to that point.
It's true. And I think there's also benefit. I mean, I've seen personally for people who take GLP-1, endogenous GLP-1 or exogenous, there's issues with some of these drugs. And things like butyrate can help with some of those GI issues and some of the side effects that they have. So it's something that we typically recommend on both sides of the spectrum. Although I'm
Yeah.
hearing more and more issues with these drugs.
I think so much of, because certainly I interview the experts. I do not prescribe them right now, but the emerging research is that the traditional allopathic medicine, their kind of go-to is everyone gets the same dose.
Yes.
And I think that, personalized medicine, really looking at it as an N of one, just like, when I was still prescribing antihypertensives, if I had 10 middle-aged women, I did not give them all the same drug. I did not give
Yeah.
them all the same dose. And I think when people are prescribing GLP-1s, like a lot of these weight loss centers, which I'm sure are well-intentioned, if you give everyone the same dose of drug, you're going to get variance in their responses to it. And
Of
so
course.
that's why I think these conversations are so important. Nutrition first, targeted supplementation, being really careful and conscientious about how we approach these things. Are there any kind of upcoming innovations or products focused on healthy aging? I know that you guys are there's probably a lot that you're working on, maybe not everything that
Yeah.
you can talk about yet, but what are the things you're excited about that BodyBio is doing moving forward with new products or existing research that you're doing right now?
So one thing we're building is our pilot study, and I'm so excited about this because it's actually on perimenopausal women. We're going to look at 30 women. We're doing it through a hospital system. We're doing everything right. I have an amazing lead researcher who has just transformed the way I'm looking at clinical trial development. This is an undertaking. So these things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
RCTs cost millions.
Yep.
And I love it when people say to us, like, well, show me the proof that phospholipids do this and this. And I'm like, you can't. There's no one's researched these things. There's a lot of, research that's out there, but nobody's actually looked directly at supplementation. So we are. And that's what I'm really excited about. So we're going to be looking at the root cause of fatigue, which is mitochondrial dysfunction.
Mhm.
And we're going to be looking at 30 women experiencing fatigue. You can't do brain fog because it leads to other issues, but brain fog is one of those, and monitoring them over a 6 month period, taking phospholipids. So they'll be taking BodyBio PC. They'll be getting to a dose of about 2 tablespoons a day. We're going to be looking at the reduction in toxins. So we're seeing systemically people that start taking PC. You see a reduction in microplastics. You see a reduction in forever chemicals, phthalates, all these weird chemicals that we've been introduced to that you don't even realize are impacting our cells, heavy metals. So I'm really excited to be able to actually publish research that says this product helps to decrease these. We're going to be looking at how it affects our mitochondria and mitochondrial energy production. So I'm really excited about that and doing some great work with mitochondrial researchers, both at University of Connecticut and over in the UK. So that is like my baby right now that I'm spending a ton of time working on, and I'm super excited about that one. The other thing that we have in the pipeline, we had a product that people just loved, and it was a prebiotic and a postbiotic. It was called Gut Plus, and that's coming back out in when's it coming out? Probably around January, February time. And so it's on stability now. NPD for us takes forever. We really want to make sure that when we're coming out with something, that the efficacy is there, the claim substantiation is there, we can really stand behind that it does what we say it's going to do. And so it takes a really long time because we like to run it through some trials internally to make sure that it is doing that. Most companies, when they come out with a product, they're going to a contract manufacturer and they're kind of signing a list and saying, this is what I want. We manufacture the stuff. And that was something that my grandfather really felt strongly about. And so we're based in New Jersey. We have 3 manufacturing facilities, and things just take a little bit longer for us, but I'm excited for that one to come out.
That is exciting. And to kind of circle back to something that you mentioned, this pilot study that you're working on, I am not aware, other than like total plasma exchange, of anything that's out there that can help kind of lower our threshold of microplastics. And that's exciting because unfortunately, I know far too much about this now. I'm down like one of those proverbial rabbit holes learning about this. I think that's really exciting because,
Very.
there are things we have control over in our environment, and sometimes there are things we do not.
Yeah.
And I think for so many of us, even talking to men's health experts like Tracy Gappen, who's a urologist, he was talking about like one of the reasons why men have plummeting testosterone rates. It's insulin resistance is certainly contributing, but the other thing is these exposure to microplastics and these endocrine mimicking chemicals that we are just, it's like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. People are just exposed and exposed and exposed. So that study sounds
And it's
particularly.
destroying our cell membranes. It's destroying our cells, and it's causing these microplastics get into the cells, to get into our mitochondria, and to alter our DNA. And so it's doing things at a cellular level that are extremely disruptive. And we've had a couple kind of N of one cases that we've been running an observational case series on about 10 people. They've been doing some microplastics testing. After the second test, so a couple of them were doing over 6 months. After the second test, they saw a 100% reduction in the largest particle size, 50% reduction in the second largest, and a 45% reduction in the smallest particle size. That's just taking 2 tablespoons of PC a day. No dietary interventions, no lifestyle changes whatsoever. And so if we can formally say, this does this, I mean, that could be huge.
Well, and I think again, it goes back to that's something that most people can do. What most people cannot do is total plasma exchange, which is
Oh,
very
no.
expensive.
Which is
Like,
great. I want to do it for Lyme, but
Yeah.
like it's
No,
very
it's
extreme.
to give everyone an idea. This functional medicine program I'm in, they did a whole presentation on it, and I just about fell out of my chair because I was
It's
like, who can
unbelievable.
afford
Yeah.
$10,000 for one series? Like that's just not affordable for
No.
99.9% of people, not at all. So it's exciting to know there are things coming down the road that sound like they may be very helpful. I kind of have some rapid fire questions for you. That's what I usually do with the in-person podcast. What's your favorite underrated gut supportive food?
Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and say sauerkraut. Yeah,
I like
I
that.
love it. I love sauerkraut. I love the juice, fermented vegetable juice.
Yeah, so good. What is your go-to longevity practice?
Oh, I think probably I'm going to step outside I'm going to take my supplement hat off and I'm going to say circadian biology, circadian rhythm, really being careful and cognizant of getting my eyes exposed to the sun first thing in the day, not using sunglasses anymore. And when I am traveling or having to look at a computer for a long period of time, making sure I'm taking care of my eyes and wearing blue light blockers and things like that.
Absolutely. What is one supplement that you never skip?
PC every day, always.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah,
And after
I'm
this
like the poster child
conversation,
for it.
yeah, absolutely. And what's one wellness trend you'd love to see disappear?
Oh. I think the claims on colostrum are really broad. Same with collagen, to be honest with you. I think that there are some of those C vitamins that just need to kind of die out. I think that in general, I'm going to go ahead and say the wellness trend that I really think is detrimental to all of us is this seed oil nonsense that we're creating. So yes, avoid the rancid, but make sure you're getting the good stuff.
And let's just to reiterate for listeners, again, omega-3s, we have to look at this with some degree of clarity. The healthy omega-3s we need, there's no question. It is, this evolution, and it's bringing greater awareness to the fact that we just need to be eating less ultra processed food. Like that is a
Mhm.
good thing that's coming out of the
Great.
seed oil debate. But I think it is taken an important nuanced conversation and it's kind of made this blanket statement that all omega-6s are bad. And let's just reiterate for listeners again, why are omega-6s so important and why do we need to be conscientious about where we are getting them from?
They're essential. They're essential to our cellular function, our cellular fluidity, our cellular neurotransmission. And so we really need them in the right balance for our cells, which are the root of every process and function in our body. So if our cells are not healthy and they're devoid of these healthy fats, then all of these processes are going to start to break down. You're going to have issues, and it's going to show up as various different symptoms, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's brain fog, whether it's fatigue, all of these things. There's a root cause for all of them.
Well, I've so enjoyed this conversation today. Please let listeners know how to learn more about your company, how to get access to your products. And just
Sure.
for listeners to know, there are some incredible resources on your website. Your blogs are excellent. That's a really great resource point if you want to dive a little bit more deeply into the science or there's something you want to learn more about.
Yeah, I love our blog, bodybio.com. And all of our handles are just at BodyBio. We try to put out a ton of just educational, informative content in digestible ways so that you can understand it. But the blog is really a great deep dive into nutritional biochemistry and science.
Hey, if you like this video, you guys are going to love this video, and I'll see you there.
The conversation I'd love to have with every 35-year-old woman is that once 40 hits, your ovaries are going to be done, and they're going to slowly, it's not like it's done overnight, they're going to slowly decline. It's going to take 10 to 15 years for these ovaries to be out. But you literally have an organ that is done doing its job. It'd be like if your heart was like, hey, I'm done. I'm just going to slowly like this. I don't understand why we don't talk about this.
Right.